Hello, everyone. My name is Hott. I'm here with Nathan Brunelle. We're both instructors at the University of Virginia, and we're going to be talking today about fixing the course and not the student, positive approaches to cultivating academic integrity.
Hey, so thanks, Robbie. Welcome, everybody. So basically what we're trying to do, or the conversation that we're trying to start here, is that Robbie and I have talked a lot about how we see our role as instructors for our students, and kind of how we sort of balance the person we want to be to our students, as well as kind of the cheating problem that computer science classes do tend to have. So certainly there's a lot of cheating that happens within computer science classes. There's data to suggest that it's happening more than in other classes even. And the response that we largely see to that is that people are trying to use more and more robust tools in order to kind of identify academic dishonesty. And the issue that Robbie and I had was that we kind of see that as a little bit inconsistent with how we prefer to view ourselves as instructors for a course. So we kind of see that using these tools as a way to encourage honesty by discouraging dishonesty, that is having more of a policing-like approach for this is sort of at odds with our preference to have more mentorship roles with our students, which we think in order to have this mentorship role, we really need to sort of form relationships with our students, be role models for our students, and sort of think of our students as people who we are there to help. So we wondered if there was some way that we could kind of, instead of saying that students are the reason for academic dishonesty, what if we just for a moment said, maybe there's something wrong with the course that's causing this. Maybe there's something that we could be doing better in order to make this academic dishonesty occur less often. So maybe there's some ways that we could communicate with our students better. Maybe there's some way that we could help develop a better culture within our classrooms that could be used in order to just as a side effect, decrease the amount of dishonesty we're seeing in our classes. So the place where we felt that we really needed to start if we were going to pursue this sort of thing is to actually talk to the students about why they cheat, to see what it is that what are their perspectives on academic dishonesty, why they might have done it, or why some of their peers might have done it as well. So Robbie and I first started out by actually talking with our students. We had frank conversations with our classes. So Robbie, what have you learned from those conversations?
Yeah, thanks. So I've had quite a bit of discussion, and students have told me quite a few different reasons for why they might have violated an honor code policy or a course collaboration policy or something like that. One of them is just that they agree with another instructor's policy more than the one for this course. Maybe they were more flexible about certain resources compared with this course, or maybe they allowed more collaboration than we did for our course. Another student just said, I forgot which policies applied to which class. Every professor has a different collaboration policy. Professors have different cheating policies, and I just couldn't keep up. I've also had students tell me, well, in the real world, I actually get to use these resources. That could be things like Stack Overflow. I've had students who said, I went on an internship this summer, and it was completely acceptable for me to look for solutions to the problems I had on Stack Overflow and to use those as part of my project, as part of the software I was developing. Why can't we do that in class? I've also had students say there was kind of this momentary temptation. So I didn't quite understand the topic that we were covering. The book wasn't that helpful. So I looked online. I started searching for resources that would help me, some kind of supplemental resources. And by Googling, I just eventually landed on an answer. So it was kind of just this momentary temptation of it's just really close to something I was already looking for. And I just needed a little extra help. And then also possibly it was just a last resort. So there's 5 minutes to the deadline and I'm going to either have to take the late penalty or do something in the moment. And so it could be that it was just that last minute, I've got 5 minutes left. It's better to get something and risk it than to take a 10% or 20% late penalty because I was just past the deadline. So that's what I've heard. What have you heard?
Yeah, so I've heard some of those things as well. Some of the other ones that I've heard that you haven't mentioned yet. So I know that there's a lot of students who sort of maybe feel a little bit competitive within their courses. So maybe if they have some sort of impression, whether or not it's valid, but they've got some sort of impression that there are other people in the class who are maybe using forbidden sources or something like that, then they feel like they're going to look like a worse student or that they know less than those peers do, unless they kind of also cheat, unless they also do some of these other things. I've even had some students who kind of turn the accusation back on me, even, where they're like, well, if you didn't want me to cheat, you shouldn't have made it so gosh darn easy. So like the idea is that it's kind of the instructor's job or whoever's designing the assignment. It's their job to make it hard for the student to cheat. And if it's kind of, if solutions are available on the web, then maybe the instructor should have picked different problems or something like that. I've also had some students who said that they maybe underestimated how much they knew in the course. So they just thought that they understood very little or much less than they actually understood. And so they thought there was no way that they could have provided any answer that was their own construction that would be of any value. So they felt the need to maybe use somebody else's answer instead. Super unfortunate circumstance for that one there. Probably the funniest one that I saw though was I had a colleague who had maybe a very vaguely worded policy in terms of what students were and were not allowed to do for their homework assignments, that just sort of said, you should do your homework and we encourage you to work with your classmates and so forth. Basically the students took a very legalistic reading of that policy and said, well, we were never told that we couldn't collaborate with literally the entire class. So we actually ended up with 90 students all sharing solutions to their assignments. So a lot of times I've seen that students will try to take a purely legalistic understanding of the policy and say, as long as I'm following the letter of the policy as written, then I must be within that policy, and sort of try to misconstrue the intention behind it and that sort of thing. Yeah, so I mean, that was one of the more extreme ones for sure, though.
That's quite a large group. So next we want to talk about some example tactics that both Nathan and I have used, as well as some of our colleagues, to try to create a more positive atmosphere towards academic integrity. One thing that we've both tried is to have some more broad collaboration policies and varied collaboration policies. So encouraging students to work together. We've tried groups of 4, 5, 6. Also, what can they share with their groups? Be that just the groups can only talk by word of mouth. the groups could share whiteboarding, but were not allowed to carry solutions back. So that in that case, each of their solutions had to be their own written work, but they could collaborate on the ideas that made up those solutions. Or that the groups could work together and share the entire written documents and submit one document for the group. Each of those, the goal is to encourage the collaborative effort of the students in the course. We've also looked at flexible late policies. So we've tried, rather than having a late policy that says there's a 10 or 20% penalty being 5 minutes late or 1 minute late, we've tried a continuous late policy so that if you're 5 minutes late, if you're an hour or two late, it's actually not that big of a penalty compared with something that would be 6, 8, 24 hours late, something like that. And the goal for that is to kind of reduce that last resort. There's 5 minutes and my grade's going to be 10% lower by submitting it just after the deadline. We hope that encourages students to say, take another hour if you need to kind of really get things written down, rather than trying to do something hastily right at the last minute. I have personally also tried to give extra course approved secondary resources. So rather than having students Google searching for additional materials if the book didn't have enough information for them, so I've linked to secondary sources like Wikipedia, secondary sources like other instructors' materials, with the goal of hopefully reducing that momentary temptation. So that if the students need more background information or more examples than what the book has, or what our lecture slides and lecture content have, there are other resources available to them. Another idea would be to obscure how grades are calculated. The goal here would be to reduce the comparison between students so they don't feel like they have to cheat if they feel like other people are cheating, that kind of thing, to kind of reduce that comparison between them. And this could be things like, I have one colleague who's gives them the grade but doesn't give students the denominator. So they get a 70 on the homework, but that's a 70 out of what? There's also competency-based grading and other systems where students are just showing competency in the areas rather than getting specific letter grades or specific numeric grades that can directly be compared throughout the course. I've also tried to discuss the motivation behind our policies, behind my policy in my course specifically. And the goal there is to encourage students to get buy-in to the policy. This was even more key this semester as we switched from in-person to online learning, where we actually, rather than saying, here's the policy we're going to follow for the rest of the semester, we said, here's the policy we've had so far. Here's the reason behind that policy. Is there a way that we can build on that reasoning and that motivation and move that into an online world? And so the goal was to get the students to buy in, to say, okay, I see where you're coming from. And I like that, or here are ways to change that. So the other thing that we want to try is to have students participate in designing these policies. Because if they believe that the policy has a good purpose and they've participated in creating this policy, then perhaps they feel more a part of that process. So these are some of the tactics that we've tried and some of the tactics that we want to try. So I think we have some Q&A time for you. So I will pass this on.
Yeah, so what we did is we sort of created a worksheet where the idea behind this worksheet was for you to sort of reflect on your classes and your students, and see if you could come up with sort of novel ways that you might be able to alter little things about your course in order to maybe reduce some of the temptation students might have to cheat. So to actually investigate what the students' perspectives are about cheating in your courses, to look at things or constructs that you have or structures you have in your courses that might influence that, and see if you can sort of reconcile things so that your course structures are not making it more likely for students to actually violate the various policies that you have in your courses. So we've got a few questions on this worksheet. We encourage you to take this worksheet to sort of do it on your own, and then also take it and have your colleagues do it, your TAs do it, and your students do it, and see if you can use that to actually start a productive conversation about different people's perspectives and different strategies for how to address those. So the first question that we have in this worksheet, it says, what policies and structures have you employed in your courses that may impact rates of academic honesty or dishonesty? So with this one, we're basically saying, what things have you done in your courses that might have some sort of impact about how much a student cheats or doesn't cheat? So maybe it was the way that you designed your assignments, whether or not you allowed collaboration on those assignments, whether or not your exams were take-home or proctored, or something like that. So just what is it about how you've set up your course that might have some sort of influence, either positive or negative, about the rate at which students engage in dishonesty. And then from there, we sort of say, what do you perceive are the most common ways your students might violate those policies? So for this one, maybe consider, like, what are actually the things, what are actually the actions that the students are taking that are violations? So maybe you think that the most common way is that students are posting their homework on Chegg and trying to find answers, or the most common way is that your students are sharing their exam or their answers on certain assignments with other classmates, or just Googling things outright, something like that. So just whatever are the actions your students are most likely taking that you would consider to be dishonest behavior. And then once you've looked at those, maybe we encourage you to consider ways that you and your students might disagree about whether or not those actions should have been permitted. So for instance, Robbie mentioned that maybe some students thought that Stack Overflow should be a totally fine thing to do for their programming assignments because they were allowed to do it on their internship. So it seems maybe artificial to those students. So when you look at the things that your students might be doing that you would consider violations, see if you can figure out some good reasons that are some of those activities where a student might disagree about whether or not that should have been permitted. And then question 4 is where we're kind of really starting to get into the students' perspectives on some of these things. So can you think of reasons where, whether it's from your perspective or from the perspective of one of your students, so some reason that might be a legitimate reason for that person to actually violate the policies. So it could be that there are ways or there are circumstances that a student might find themselves in where it suddenly seems like a totally legitimate reason to actually engage in some of this behavior that you might consider dishonest. So maybe some student was disadvantaged in some way, or maybe for instance, maybe a prerequisite course didn't cover as much of some content as you might have hoped. And so maybe that student got a little bit carried away with sort of learning that background material, or wasn't sure what was background material or what wasn't background material, and found themselves just with the solution to some problem because of that. So think about, are there any legitimate reasons, either from your perspective or from a student's perspective, that they might actually violate those policies? And then considering these things, keeping these things in mind, maybe there are some changes that you could actually make to your course's design. So if you think that there are certain legitimate reasons a student might violate your policy, maybe it's worthwhile to consider updating your policy to accommodate that, or else change the design for how assignments are working or something, so that that issue no longer arises. You no longer have a student who feels compelled to make this impossible choice. And then once you've kind of discussed what are some different ways that you can maybe modify your course in order to more closely align your perspectives and students' perspectives about what constitutes integrity in your particular course, I encourage you to repeat this with your students, with your TAs, maybe with your colleagues who have taught the same course that you have, or other courses and so forth, and sort of compare notes, compare perspectives, and try to iterate on that to see if you can make progress towards coming together about maybe the best way to encourage your students to learn without threatening your students with kind of consequence for academic dishonesty.
Great, thanks. So I will say that I definitely missed having this discussion at SIGCSE this year. I think Nathan will agree.
Oh yeah.
So we would love to continue this discussion after you've talked about it, or even before you've talked about it with people at your university. Come and engage with us in the larger community. We've set up a Piazza discussion board. The link is on the screen. It'll also be on the worksheet. Come in and engage with us and chat with us and share with us things that are working and are not working, so that we can help each other promote academic integrity in our classes. So do you have anything to add, Nate?
No, I'm just super excited to engage with you all, to hear your thoughts, and to see a vibrant discussion on this. Thanks for stopping by.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care.